children and disabled people, those powers are unaccountable, and unaccountable power will, as a matter of human experience, be abused. And we're going to see those powers used to target people of particular age, people of particular racial profile, and quite frankly, the idea that you can send your 12-year-old child or 13-year-old child on the train into the city and they get strip searched by someone, and it doesn't have to be someone of the same sex either that does the strip searching, is, I think, horrendous, and I don't want this to be the kind of society that we live in. And I think those laws should be repealed. I think they are an absolute affront to the idea of the rule of law.
Well, Robert Clark, what do you make of Brian Walter's criticisms of the legislation?
Well, the legislation concerns part of the police portfolio rather than the Attorney General, so I haven't been involved with the detailed evaluation of it. Obviously, it was the current government's legislation rather than our side of politics.
Have they gone too far?
Well, I'm not going I'm not in a position to express a view on that. If it is being abused, then there needs to be a remedy against it. I'd be interested to know what, in theory at least, the powers are for searching people coming into Parliament House, for example. The question is, how is it being exercised? As I said earlier, if the powers are being exercised inappropriately, vindictively, in a discriminatory manner, then that's clearly inappropriate.
Well, we've got a lot of things we could talk about, but I'd like you to maybe pitch to our audience, both of you. It's an audience interested in human rights and justice. Why should voters park their vote with you? And maybe I'll give each of you 2 or 3 minutes to try and crystallise why you think your party represents the best way forward.
I joined the Greens in 1992 when we formed in Victoria, and I did so because I believe in the importance of the environment, in non-violence, in social justice and in grassroots democracy. Those are the 4 pillars of the Greens worldwide. And here in Victoria, increasingly in this area of human rights, what we've seen is a race to the bottom, a law and order bidding war before each election, and we've seen some very bad laws which have resulted in the unaccountable exercise of power in circumstances where our greatest protection lies in human rights, where we value even the most marginalised in the community and we learn and share from them so that our creativity can find its full expression, where we can live in harmony with our environment in a way that recognises that we've got to hand it on to our children and grandchildren into the future, where we recognise that we need to find ways to give the community ways to have input into the kind of society that they live in so that they can own the community. It isn't just all about big money politics and decisions made over there, but we all have a say. And those values, be it gay marriage, be it the rule of law and good court systems which affirm the values that we stand for, those are things which I feel important enough to want to stand for Parliament for the Greens for.
Robert Clark.
Thanks, Damien. Our side of politics have been strong supporters of people's rights since our inception in the 1940s. I think we have 2 key foci in our approach to rights. The first is to make sure that we don't destroy what's been built up over many generations. The second is to focus on what is practical and achievable and delivers concrete results. And if you look at what's happened in Victoria over the last decade or so, despite all the charters, all the grand statements by our Attorney General as the alleged champion of human rights, in fact Victoria has been going backwards It's not just if you're having to wait 4 years for your case to come to trial, whether you're an accused or whether you're a victim. It's not just if you've nearly finished serving your prison term before your appeal comes on before the Court of Appeal. It's not just when people are automatically issued with infringement notices when they're homeless or suffering from mental illness and there's no mechanism to bring them promptly before a court to find out why they're mounting up such huge fine debts. It's not justice when the courts are lumbered with inefficient technology that impedes their ability to deliver justice. It's not just when you've got the sort of patchwork justice that we spoke about earlier, where your rights depend on where you happen to live. It's not just when our courts are subject to constant attacks on their independence and constant denigration of the judiciary, as we've seen under the current government. These are all the practical issues of justice and of delivering just results for individuals that our side of politics, my side of politics, is keen to make a difference to and keen to remedy with a change of government. It's all very well to talk in abstract about rights. The question is what is delivered. Rights have been going backwards in Victoria over the last decade, and we want to reverse that.
We have some roving mics, and it would be great to hear questions from the audience for people, for our guests. Does anyone have a question? Yep. The mic will come to you. And if I could ask you to identify yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is John Reid. I'm a senior research fellow at Monash University in the School of Psychology and Psychiatry. It seems to me that one of the human rights that no one appears to be prepared to address is the right to euthanasia. Now, where do the parties stand on that? I mean, this is something where a minority religious view is dictating a social moray to the rest of the community.
Who'd like to go first?
Well, I will, because the Greens introduced a Dying with Dignity bill into the Victorian Parliament in this last session, and we support the Dying with Dignity Charter, and we support the right to have dying with dignity occur. It is occurring under the table, as it were, now, and it ought to be appropriately recognised in law. And so I fully support that now.
Robert Clark.
Euthanasia is a conscience issue within the Liberal and National parties, and as you know, there was legislation debated in the Legislative Council and voted on a conscience issue, at least by the two major parties. I just make one point about your question. I think both members on both sides of that argument were arguing primarily on practical and social consequences one way or another. I don't think it is fair to have characterised the debate as a religious debate. The question was about what the consequences were, either of having or not having euthanasia laws. But as I say, from our side of politics, it's a matter of individual conscience.
Any other questions? Maybe down here and then up the back.
Hello, my name is Thomas Bland. I'm a student at the University of Melbourne Law School. I have a question for Mr. Clark. You criticised the dialogue model of the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities for the potential of Parliament to essentially legislate around or perhaps ignore the mechanisms it puts in place, such as statements of compatibility when making legislation and addressing statements of declarations of inconsistent interpretation issued by the courts. And as an alternative to that, you would favour what has been proposed by the Federal Attorney General, which is a parliamentary model, which would require more legislative scrutiny before enacting legislation. My question to you is this: if you are concerned about Parliaments essentially ignoring or circumventing the mechanisms they put in place for themselves to respect human rights in legislation, how can removing the judicial element of that ensure greater and more effective scrutiny of rights